Elite responses to anti-establishment politics always go through two phases. First, dismiss, ignore, or ridicule them. Then, if they don't go away, or worse, if they look like they can win, posit them as dangerous. Now, this happened to Jeremy Corbyn before 2017. He was mainly just mocked as a loser. Then, after getting 40% in a general election, he was cast as a demonic, anti-Semite racist, a threat to the fabric of society. Something similar is happening now to the Greens. So before the Gorton and Denton by-election, they were cast as a bunch of sandal-wearing no-hopers. But now they've won, well, all of a sudden, they're a danger to democracy.
Matthew Goodwin, you hoped to be Reform's 9th MP. What went wrong? Because it wasn't even close.
Sectarianism. That's what happened.
I mean, this is clearly sectarian campaigning.
So the Gorton and Denton by-election is a victory. Yes, it's a victory for sectarian voting. It's a victory for cheating in elections.
Yes, the hippie vegans who want to legalise drugs are in fact a sectarian menace. In a statement posted to X after his defeat, Matt Goodwin said this statement: "We are losing our country. A dangerous Muslim sectarianism has emerged. We have only one general election left to save Britain. Vote reform every chance you get. I will continue the fight. I will always fight for you. I will stand at the next general election, Matt." And then you can see him solemnly looking at his smartphone as he posts send. Matt Goodwin, remember, is a man who wants to relitigate whether non-white people can be English. So it's a bit rich. He's now complaining about ethnic identity politics. The charge, though, against the Greens has spread beyond Reform politicians and GB News.
Why did you put a photograph of the Indian Prime Minister, a Hindu nationalist, in election videos for a constituency in Manchester?
Well, the point really is about international human rights. So, for instance, I'm a Jewish man, as I've talked about. There's only 5 Jewish people in British political history who have led political parties. So I take anti-Semitism in this country really seriously.
I asked you about the Indian Prime Minister.
No, but this is where I'm going. So we have a Keir Starmer who is having meetings with Benjamin Netanyahu, with Modi, with Trump. There is a pattern to the people that Keir Starmer is pally with. Now,
well, he's pally, as you put it, with prime ministers and presidents, which is what he's paid by us as taxpayers to do, isn't it? That's what his job is. Let me ask you again, why did you put a picture of a Hindu nationalist in election literature in Manchester?
Well, as I was saying, Nick, we need to have diplomatic relationships with world leaders. Sure, with presidents and prime ministers, that's part of being a prime minister. That's very, very different to the cosy relationships that we've seen, particularly with Benjamin Netanyahu, where Keir Starmer went out on TV and radio and said that Israel had the right to cut off food, water and electricity from the Palestinians.
Shall I ask you for the third time about the Hindu nationalist leader, Narendra Modi? Why did you put the picture in a large Muslim population constituency of a Hindu in your election literature? Was it not to play to the racism of some voters?
I think the question is inherently verging on racism in itself. Modi is an authoritarian who whether you're Jewish, Muslim, or you're non-faith, should have problems with the authoritarianism that Keir Starmer is working with in cosy ways. That's very different to having diplomatic relationships.
So you deny playing to racism?
Absolutely deny playing to racism. What I'm talking about there is peace, human rights, and calling out the bad decisions of this Prime Minister and this government and the kind of people that he's not just working with, but as I say, cozying up with and making deals with, whereas we're not working with other people, such as our European neighbours, in the way that we should.
Now, the attack from Nick Robinson there was a reference to a part of a video put out by the Greens which showed Starmer with Narendra Modi. So you can see that image there. I mean, it appeared in videos which were in both Urdu and Bengali. Now, the idea is that this is a dog whistle to try and whip up Muslims who Nick Robinson is applying not just care about sort of politics in the subcontinent, but he's saying it's because they're racist against Hindus, essentially. He's saying, is this not a dog whistle? You're saying, Keir Starmer likes Hindus, you're Muslims, therefore vote for us because you hate Hindus. That seems to be the argument. It's obviously incredibly unfair, especially as Labour have done this too, right? So this is a flyer from the by-election in 2021 in Batley and Spen. Don't risk a Tory MP who is not on your side. And then in the top right, you've got Boris Johnson shaking hands with Narendra Modi. So there's nothing new. Neither is it new to put out campaign material in foreign languages, because Labour have done this too. This is a leaflet in Yiddish, which Labour produced for ultra-Orthodox areas of North London in 2010. However, all of a sudden, now the Greens look like they might be a genuine electoral threat to the two major parties. This is a threat to democracy. Zach has been effectively pushing back, though. This is another clip from the BBC.
They are also claiming that the way you went away about your leafleting in some of the way you were campaigning was wrong, and you were using mechanisms that they don't think are fair. What's your response?
I mean, they sound like sore losers.
There's so many clips today where there's actually the best one was from Good Morning Britain, but they tried to give us like a copyright strike for a video earlier this week, so we didn't show it. But there's all these clips of hosts sort of putting questions to the Greens, or Zach Polanski specifically, which they seem kind of embarrassed to be saying. Like clearly they feel like they've suddenly now, because this has become a talking point, they've got to say it. And they say, but do you think that the fact that Muslim people vote, is that a bit weird? And then Zach's like, not really. The sectarian charge also got tied up with another allegation, that of so-called family voting. Now, this is something that not many people in political journalism had heard of until last night, when Sam Coates tweeted this. So we've got the eyes emojis, which means this is big news, something's going on here, guys. And then it says, the Electoral Commission give democracy volunteers access to polling stations at election time. Only they and the police can go inside. They've just issued this report about family voting in Gorton and Denton. Now, this is what democracy volunteers said about family voting. So they say, today we have seen concerningly high levels of family voting in Gorton and Denton. Based on our assessment of today's observations, we have seen the highest levels of family voting at any election in our 10-year history of observing elections in the UK. We rarely issue a report on the night of an election, but the data we have collected today on family voting, when compared to other recent by-elections, is extremely high. In the other recent Westminster parliamentary by-election in Runcorn and Helsby, we saw family voting in 12% of polling stations, affecting 1% of voters. In Gorton and Denton, we observed family voting in 68% of polling stations, affecting 12% of those voters observed. So what is family voting? Well, it's when more than one person goes into the voting booth at the same time. And it is illegal. So the law is there to prevent, for example, a husband pressuring his wife to vote a particular way. It's supposed to protect the complete secrecy of an individual's vote. And democracy volunteers, I mean, do also seem to be a legitimate organisation. They've been doing this kind of thing for a decade, although, you know, no one had heard of them before this. So it's like, oh, the democracy volunteers have said it's not right. It's not like the Carter Center. You know, like when we talk about elections in, say, Venezuela when they're contested, we say, okay, is this just sort of propaganda put forward by the right to try and delegitimize left-wingers, or is this for real? And if the Carter Center have said, actually, there were problems, okay, that's serious. They've been around for a very long time, very legitimate people. Democracy volunteers, I had not heard of them until yesterday. I'm pretty sure Sam Coates hadn't either. Founded by a former Lib Dem MP. Also, questions have been raised about their report, namely, why, if they saw so much illegality taking place, they didn't inform anyone at the time. So the returning officer running the by-election said this about the affair. Polling station staff are trained to look out for any evidence of undue influence on voters. No such issues have been reported today. If democracy volunteers were so concerned about alleged issues, they could and should have raised them with us during polling hours so that immediate action could be taken. We have operated a central by-election hub which has been rapidly responding to reported issues during the day in liaison with the police, who had a presence at every polling station where necessary. It is extremely disappointing that democracy volunteers have waited until after polls have closed to make such claims. Manchester Police have also said that no electoral crimes were reported to them during the vote, and the Electoral Commission also appears to be mystified, saying this: we are aware of the report. Electoral offences are a matter for the police. We encourage anyone who believes an offence has occurred to report it to the police. The statutory Electoral Observer Code of Practice says that electoral observers may bring potential irregularities, fraud or significant problems to the attention of elected officials on the spot. So this group, which no one had ever heard of, says they've seen people going into voting booths together. Or, I mean, the problem here is it's very ambiguous. What counts as this, right? Is it just that a husband and wife have gone into the polling booth together, or a couple of neighbours have gone into the polling booth and have a conversation about who they're going to vote for, or what's the correct box to tick, yada, yada, yada. Could be all sorts of things here. And then the Electoral Commission said, well, if this group saw it, they probably should have reported it. Nothing has been reported, it seems. Sam Coates, though, who I suppose first announced this to the world, sort of went big on this story. He thinks this is a big deal.
I was in Gorton and Denton and just trying to talk to people. I did speak to try to speak to a number of members of the South Asian community. Women turned to me and just said, no, my husband deals with that.
Gosh.
And I was quite struck by that. Obviously, we couldn't capture that on camera. And I think that this is going to dominate the night.
This is going to dominate the night. I love it when, like a political journalist says it like it's separate from them. This is going to dominate the night. It's like, well, you're kind of making it dominate the night.
This thing I've chosen is going to dominate the night. It's not about me. I'm not making all of this about me. It's not about these 75,000 people in this constituency who've engaged in a mass process of democracy. No, it's all about me and my chosen talking point. But honest God, it's the big story.
I mean, we've got more clips to go through, but this issue where there's things that have just happened forever, right? You have political parties who appeal. Yes, they have a broad message to the general population, and then they have targeted messages to different subsets of that population. The Tories have also done it, by the way. I saw a great video on social media yesterday of to the Indian community with Boris Johnson shaking hands with Modi, and then with all of this.
I mean, basically, their campaigns in Harrow,
it's all about
a bilingual essentially. But anyway,
so yeah, it's nothing new. This issue of family voting has never been mentioned before.
No,
and now all of a sudden there is a anti-establishment party that is doing well, and suddenly now, oh my God, democracy is in crisis.
It's really simple. If you see somebody breaking the law, contact the police. I thought that's quite self-evident to most people, let alone boomer electoral observers who are part of an organisation started by a Liberal Democrat MP. So these are, I would have presumed, people who really care about process. Good, we need people like that in society, right? If you care about process and somebody is breaking the law and you see it with your own eyes, you need to report that to the police. Look, if you see that happening, you would obviously try and stop it or report it. If you don't try and stop it, but you wait until literally the close of polls, people can't vote anymore, and you then give it to the press in order to kick up a stink, I'm not going to necessarily ascribe good intentions to you. Maybe that's unfair of me, but I find it quite strange. You don't try and resolve that problem as it's happening. You wait, and then you give it to the media afterwards. I've never seen anything like this. And I think, maybe I'm wrong. That feels like an effort to undermine the legitimacy of a vote. Now, when this happened, people are saying, this is terrible, blah, blah, blah. In the end, the Greens won by, 4,400 votes. If the Greens had won by 200-300 votes, we would have heard no end of this saga. This would have been Stop the Steal, Manchester South edition. In terms of the sectarianism stuff, I mean, crazy. This idea that you'll have patriarchal Muslim men, who read Sayyid Qutb, who, Quranic scholars, who are, judiciously social conservative, and they've instructed their poor, exploited, dominated, set upon wives, you will, inshallah, you will vote by the will of God Almighty, you will vote for the white British lady with blonde hair and greyhounds. You will vote for the party led by the gay Jewish man. What the hell are you talking about? You will vote for the party which wants to legalize crack cocaine and heroin by the will of God, I tell you, woman. Come on, this is crazy. Like, this is La La Land. This is crazy. And the worrying thing is, Michael, large parts of the British media now give this stuff credibility. They believe in it. They believe that they either believe in it or they believe in the possibility of it. Sectarianism, by the way, is not when a party led by a Jewish guy and the candidate's white British attracts the votes of Muslims. That is not what sectarianism is. And here's the thing. Ash put it so well the other day on the show. Everybody was telling Jeremy Corbyn in 2017, 2018, 2019, you've lost the Jewish vote. But that's fine. You can talk about the British Jewish vote as a block vote, which, by the way, you shouldn't, right? In a liberal democracy, people are individuals. They can vote how they like. You lost the Jewish vote. Everybody said it for years. It's all I heard. I heard that phrase every day for years. But, if you said the Muslim vote, sectarianism, I've had enough. I'm tired of it. And on the Narendra Modi stuff, you know, you're showing images of Narendra Modi and Keir Starmer. On the one hand, it's true. Keir Starmer's job as the Prime Minister is to talk to the elected head of state of India. And if Zach Polanski was the PM, I would like him to do the same, of course. But the way that Nick Robinson put it answered his own question. Why have you got images of the Hindu nationalist Narendra Modi with Keir Starmer? Because he's a Hindu nationalist. This man was a member of the RSS, an organisation which has been banned in India 3 times since Indian independence, which was connected to the man who murdered Mahatma Gandhi. These are fanatics, right? Now, it's the other side of the world. We don't need to worry about it too much. But if somebody is saying, look, he's a bit of a bad dude, this Narendra Modi, if you're claiming to be somebody who believes in human rights and yet you're with Modi, Netanyahu, there's a pattern here, right? And that's what the Greens did. It's a perfectly legitimate thing to do. What is good for the goose is good for the gander. They can't really go on the anti-Semitic stuff. They'd love to, by the way, because, of course, Zach Polanski's Jewish. So they've gone for this instead.
Yeah, I mean, it is also, you know, I said on Wednesday, I think there's something a bit cheap about the whole Keir Starmer stood next to Narendra Modi, because I think that, you know, they're the world's most populous country. He's the democratically elected leader. You know, I think Keir Starmer should meet Narendra Modi. But there's nothing dangerous about putting that on a flyer, in the same way that every other political party forever has done this. So it's very similar to the Corbyn anti-Semitism, where it's sort of things that used to be normal and sort of didn't really get noted, or Corbyn insurrections, let's say, suddenly are a crisis in democracy because someone you don't like is doing it. And
by the way, the public's tired of this, Michael. They're sick of it. And that's one of the reasons why Hannah Spencer won. They are sick of it. They want politics to make their lives better. They're not interested in this permanent nonsense and drama. They're not. You know, you can't say what's going on in Gaza. You can't call it a genocide. But apparently sharing a photo, it's a real photo, it's not a fake photo, of Modi and Starmer, well, that's appalling. I mean, there is a reason that people are coming to organisations like Novara Media. It's because we are not just offering this low information slop.
Which is why we have got, with 16 people of 5,000 viewers, I wanted to say we've got over 5,000 people watching. Hopefully we'll get over 5,000 people by the end of the show. If you want to support Novara Media, you know we are funded by you guys. If you are already a supporter, if you've been a supporter for years, we love you. Thank you so much. You make all of this possible. If not, please do consider going to novaramedia.com/support. And we will continue doing what we like to think is pretty excellent coverage of elections for the rest of the year and for the rest of the decade, for the rest of the century, hopefully. Reform's Nigel Farage has now written to Manchester Police about the Democracy Volunteers report. It's unclear what they'll do about it. Labour have also called for an investigation. The Greens, for their part, have also said they'll support one too. Of course, it is important to note, if so-called family voting did take place, we have no idea who it would have benefited, right? The Democracy Volunteers haven't put in their report that there were all these very religious Muslim men forcing their wives to vote for the white English plumber lady. That's not what they've said. However, Reform's Nadeem Zahawi on Sky was happy to fill in the blanks.
Do you think that this election, from what you have seen, is illegitimate? And on the basis of what we've seen so far, should there be a challenge to the pretty convincing election result by the Greens right now?
Well, you broke the story earlier tonight about family voting, which is a euphemism for cheating, right? There is no such thing as family voting. I've stood in many elections, both local and national. I've never heard of anyone behaving in that way. And clearly, credible election observers demonstrated that there's at least 12% of the sample that they observed practice this cheating, this family vote. Maybe it's the same euphemism as grooming gangs, I don't know. But nevertheless, it is very dangerous, it's ominous, and it's bad. And we will consider our position and we'll look at all this stuff.
Do you think there's we're in very dangerous territory. Are you suggesting that this is an illegitimate result?
Let's see what the Electoral Commission says on this. I think it's important. It's unprecedented for serious election observers to put out a report at 10:01 saying something really, really bad has happened in this by-election. And I think it's important that we surface these issues, we raise these issues. We mustn't hide behind our finger. For far too long, I think we've allowed, and Nigel's spoken about this a decade ago, sectarianism into our democracy.
This is another trick they played with Corbyn and Labour, where they sort of said, you know, you might think that this is explainable, but this hasn't happened before. There's never been a front page of the Times called Corbyn's Factory of Hate. You know, the fact that there are issues being raised that have never been raised before is no longer a sign that maybe the Green Party are being treated differently to other parties. It's a sign that the Green Party must be exceptional compared to other parties, right? And it becomes this self-reinforcing thing. Oh, but it's shocking that we even have to have this discussion, was what was always said when it came to Labour anti-Semitism. And I think you're seeing a very similar thing here.
Sometimes it's actually wise to think like an Iranian grandmother. Okay, so I think about my grandmother. She was born in 1926. If she heard that sentence, we've never had this before, her first reaction would be, haven't we? I don't know, you tell me. Is Nadim Zahawi now a political encyclopedia? I can tell you, by the way, we have had it in the past. It was made with regards to Irish Catholics and Catholic votes in this country. The idea that, for instance, undue religious influence was coming from imams and religious figures was often claimed with regards to Lutfur Rahman and Tower Hamlets. And indeed, the very offences that he was alleged to be involved in were originally used against Catholics, 100 years ago plus. So first of all, this is not new. It's not never happened before. The treatment of Corbyn, well, we've never had someone on the front page of the Times list. Well, go back to the early 1980s and look at how the Sun newspaper treated Michael Foot. We absolutely have. That's the first thing. Secondly, had he ever heard of Democracy Volunteers before last night? This is a very serious allegation. We're going to talk about it for 20 minutes as if, the world...
Democracy Volunteer... For an issue to cause Democracy Volunteers to put out a comment 1 minute after the polls close, it must be incredibly serious.
But again,
Democracy Volunteers are saying it.
We've never had this before. No, we haven't, because presumably when this used to happen, somebody would get hold of the police. Somebody's breaking the law. These are quite sensible responses. But again, I don't know what the hell is going on, because these aren't stupid people, or at least I don't think they are. We don't have sensible political analysis anymore. I don't know why. I don't know what's going on. It's getting worse. I'm not suggesting we have some golden age, but clearly we're going into some la-la land, I'll use that phrase again, which is, I will say it's unprecedented. You had also there, this is really important, Michael, you had Sonia Soda, a former, she's not been a Labour candidate, I don't think, but she's sought to be a Labour candidate in the past. She was an advisor at Ed Miliband. She was critical of Labour and Keir Starmer, but that's her political, and that's fine, that's her political affiliation historically. And you have Nadim Zahawi, of course, formerly a Tory, now Reform. Where's the Green person, right? So you have BBC Question Time on the same day as the vote on the Thursday, BBC Question Time. You've got the ballots, you can't vote after 10 o'clock. BBC Question Time goes live at 10:30. It's easily the most explosive by-election result since 1962, maybe even more so, certainly in my life, but there's no Green Party person there. There wasn't last Thursday either. And then on the show on Sky, there's no Green person either. And they're just concocting this nonsense. And then people worry about, we're losing trust and faith in democracy and the political process and the parties. Well, it's because you just deal in trivia and nonsense and lies and sometimes even defamation. I'm not saying Sky did. I think the Labour Party certainly veered into that at times with regards to their campaign. It's upsetting. It's really upsetting. The Greens just got 14,000 and a bit of votes. They've obviously done something interesting. They've obviously appealed to some people in that constituency in a way that nobody was expecting. That is the story, right? What regular punters are seeing is a white working class lady who's a plumber with a Northwest Manc accent talking. I don't see many people like that in politics. Why are you talking about this organisation I'd never heard of before as if it was a Nobel Peace Prize winning, sacrosanct agent of human sensibilities and rational, enlightened government? Without the Democracy Volunteers, we can't have democracy. I mean, Christ. And it's, I posted this on X, the meme that the right used to love sharing about they changed the microchip, about the thing that you get upset about in the back of the head. That's the right now. That's the right. They used to say that about the left, didn't they? Oh, they've changed one thing to get upset about. Now it's more rage about this. Literally, 1001, the right, new chip. It's family influence, it's Democracy Volunteers. New chip, new chip, new chip. And here's the thing, Michael. The right are becoming all the things they claim to hate. Censorious, whinging, conspiratorial, negative. These were all the things they claimed about the left. doing the country down all the time. They're becoming all the things they claim to hate. And that's a very, very dangerous thing to do, you know? Never become the thing you hate.
Let's, for the final word on family voting, or so-called family voting, let's go to a clip from an interview. We'll be putting out the full interview over the weekend with Green Deputy Leader Muffin Ali.
I think that's just a sign of desperation. You know, I think the results haven't gone the way they thought they would, and I think it's just a sign of desperation. I've knocked on doors where the father has voted for Labour, and the mother and the children have voted Green. So if there's such thing as family voting, it hasn't obviously worked in those families where families have decided to go different ways. Everyone's going to discuss what policies they agree with, what direction they want the country to travel in. Do they want to stay in, do they want to be stuck in time, or do they want to actually move forward and come up with some fresh ideas? People are going to have those debates. That's expected, and that should be encouraged. What we shouldn't do is say, right, okay, people dictate how others vote, right? People shouldn't be able to influence and force others to vote in a particular way. And I don't think that's happened.
I mean, he seemed quite magnanimous there, didn't he?
He was very tired. He'd got up at 4 a.m. that
so
morning.
Maybe it wasn't him being diplomatic.
He's very magnanimous and calm. Yeah, I think he's got no energy. He'd got up at 4 a.m. He left Leeds at 6 a.m. and I think that was at like 4 a.m., 3 a.m. So he was probably knackered. He's obviously been campaigning non-stop for a month. I have to say as well, you know, Muffin Ali, you talk to him, a really affable, thoughtful, nice person. If you just read the newspapers, you'd think this guy is a demon. You know, it's a cliche that you're told so much. I remember my dad saying it to me, don't believe what you read in the newspapers, it's garbage. You know what? A lot of the time that's true.
The family voting allegations seem quite new. The fear-mongering about any coalition which includes both Muslims and the organised left is much more familiar. Been around for a while. Been around in many European countries, in fact. Some commentators are taking this to the extreme. Jake Wallace-Simons is the former editor of the Jewish Chronicle. He said, as the Iranian Revolution of 1979 showed, any coalition between progressives and Islamists ends up with the lefties being discarded when they have served their purpose amid a drive towards the imposition of Sharia. Will Hannah Spencer and the gay Jew Zach Polanski regret their role in accelerating the path to Sharia in Britain?
Well, we've been talking about the legalisation or decriminalisation of drugs a lot on this show. But you know what? You don't need to take drugs in this country. You can just read Jake Wallace-Simons in the Daily Telegraph. It's the same thing. It's a hell of a trip and it doesn't make any sense.
Let's give the last word to one Muslim voter who called into LBC to explain why their community backed the Greens in Gorton and Denton.
A lot of Muslims who are religiously conservative actually just voted for a white working class woman and a party which is led by a very proud Jewish person who's also gay.
Yeah.
So all these stereotypes,
excellent observation.
Yeah, they don't matter much. And I think the other thing is that the Muslim community has been under siege by reform, by Matt Goodwin and others, because they've been talking about grooming gangs, and somehow it's as if sort of sexual abuse is somewhat a uniquely Muslim phenomena. And then you've seen Shabana Mahmood, who's a Pakistani, right? And she, of Pakistani origin, and she has made changes to indefinite leave to remain, which make it very, very difficult for the community to sort of have people come over, or people who are here, their lives are being disrupted, threatened, and disproportionately. So it should be no surprise that this community made a very political decision of switching. They used to be 85% for Labour. They have been switching, and they've switched towards Greens and your party and other left-wing factions, and they made that switch even more explicit.
I mean, the point was put very well there, right? Which is that if, you know, that Labour have been, I mean, island of strangers, whatever, they've been very willing to attack, or I suppose take a hostile stance, let's say, towards immigrant communities. Reform, obviously, just outright sort of calling Islam a threat to the country. If you're constantly like being negative about a community, then the whole point of democracy is that they can punish you for that. Like, that's not sectarianism. That's just like, leave us alone, please.
Yeah. I've said that younger Muslims were going green and older ones were staying with Labour. I did hear older Muslims also going green because of this issue of indefinite leave to remain being changed. Many people allegedly told Labour canvassers, it's, you can do this policy if people are coming here next year, but for people already here and you changing the rules retrospectively when they've made plans, etc., that's not fair. Now, people watching or listening to this can agree or disagree with that, but I think it does probably feel intuitively unfair for many people. And again, it's like you said, and it costs Labour votes. That's how democracy works, right? If you don't like it, you probably shouldn't live in a democracy. That's just how it works. With a multi-party system, if the party that has power is letting you down, you go to another one. And this analysis of it's sectarianism if they disagree with me, it's community cohesion if they're on my side, this is so fatuous and childish. I've had enough of it, and I think the public's had enough of it too.